Hi everyone, thank you for coming. My name is Miki Nora Chan and I'm on Diversity Suite Sourcing team in Sunnyvale. I'm very excited to welcome Adisa Banjoko to Google. And he's going to talk about his latest book, Bobby Bruce and the Bronx, The Secrets of Hip Hop Chess. So I met Adisa for the first time at Rock the School Bells. It's a conference and for students and educators. The purpose was to give workshops to enhance their ability to critically think about current issues for hip hop. So Adisa gave one of the presentations, and after that I learned more about connection between hip hop and chess. So I'm really excited to know more about it and his books. I'd like to talk a little bit more about Adisa. So he covered Eazy-E and NWA. So he was one of the first writers to cover them. And he went on to write early rap publications such as Source, Vibe, and Rap Pages. And he was also one of the first writers to cover the articles connecting hip hop to Eastern philosophy and martial arts. And he also, his work of Hip Hop Chess Federation, so it's what non-profit organization, and it's to help young people overcome difficulties through hip hop, martial arts, and chess. And it was covered by Rolling Stone, Forbes, and Good Morning America, and so on. So without further ado, please help me welcome Adisa Banjoko.
Is this thing on? Thank you guys for coming out. It's really awesome to be here, so thank you. So if you notice, the title of the book was a little different a couple weeks ago when I started this thing. Bobby, Bruce, and Bam, right? So we're talking about Bobby Fischer, Bruce Lee, and Afrika Bambaataa. So you see him there and you see him there. Unfortunately, despite being a pioneer of hip hop, he's been caught up in an insane scandal. So we switched it to Bobby, Bruce, and the Bronx, which is where he's originally from. So this whole thing is changing. Like, you can go to bobbybruceandbam.com and still buy this book as it looks, but in about 72 hours, it's Bobby, Bruce, and the Bronx.
It's changed already. I just went to it, the domain's off.
Is it off? Yeah, see, I got good people. They're already like, good people, like, we're switching it. So I just got the new cover last night. So in any case, my name is Adisa. My nickname is The Bishop. My nonprofit, Hip Hop Chess Federation, fuses music, chess, and martial arts to promote unity, strategy, and nonviolence. Essentially, when I was young, I was obsessed with Kung Fu films. I was obsessed with the television show Kung Fu, Bruce Lee films. And when I got older, I started my first job writing was to interview Eazy-E for my high school newspaper. And at the time, I was kind of hustling him. He didn't know. Like, they had just dropped a record, and I called over there, and I was like, "Hello, is Eazy-E there?" And they were like, "No." I left with a message. I was like, "I'm a big-time writer from the Bay Area. I'd love to connect with him, have him call me." And then when I came back, my mom was like, "Oh, this boy named Eric left a message for you from Los Angeles." And I was like, "Really?" So then I called. He was like, "Hello?" And it was his house. It was his home number. I was like, I really like the record Boys in the Hood. I think it would be good if I did a story on you." So he was like, "Okay." So over the course of some weeks, I keep talking with him, and I interviewed him. My mom was a secretary, so she had all this stuff that you could hook up to phones at the time to record interviews. So I recorded this interview with him, and we just became like, it was this odd friendship, right, between this gangster rapper and this suburban black kid. And one day he's like, "So hey man, like, is this going on, the Chronicle? My manager meant to ask me to ask you, is it in the Examiner? Like, who do you write for?" And I was like, "I gotta be honest, man. I'm just a 17-year-old kid, man." I was like, "I just really like your music." And like, the song really wasn't a hit. Boys in the Hood was only like maybe a month old. So he was like, "I don't care. This is awesome. Let's do the story." So I did the story, and we stayed cool until he passed away. But that's how I got my start writing. And so this was before hip hop magazines existed. You know, there was no Source, there was no allhiphop.com, no World Star, none of that stuff existed. So the more that I started listening to hip hop, you know, around that same time I'm listening to Public Enemy, and I'm hearing him say things like, no matter what the name, we're all the same pieces in one big chess game. And so lyrics like that, like, because I liked chess, and I love chess, I'm just not that good at it. So like, do not think I'm like gonna wow you on the boards at all ever. But the reason I liked it is because I started learning things about life, about patience and things like that. And the more I listened to hip hop over the years, I made this bank in my head of what was what. And so I started realizing that these connections were really deep. Later on, I created the Hip Hop Chess Federation in 2006, and the way that happened is I went for an author visit for one of my other previous books, which is called Lyrical Swords. It was my first book. And so I went into the juvenile hall. I was bombing, right? Because they wanted me to talk about, you know, journalism as a career, and like none of the kids cared about journalism. They're like, you ever met Snoop Dogg? I talked to him on the phone once. You ever met so-and-so? So, like, they didn't care about writing, like, at all. So I was like, all right, so, do any of you guys know how to play chess? Because I just started teaching my son chess, and I just happen to have the pieces in the bag in my thing. So I'm like, I'm gonna waste time teaching these kids chess because I'm sure they don't know how to play. I said, who here knows how to play chess? And like 85% of the room. I was like, oh, okay, so, who's the best in here? I only want you to keep your hand up if you're the best, only the best. And then so only a few hands went down. I was like, all right, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna have a tournament right now. Whoever wins will get a book. They were like, all right, so everybody circles up. So the first game, these two black kids are playing. And there was this white kid who was in the hall, and he was in the inner circle. So the guy was getting ready to move his knight, and he was like, don't move your knight. And dude was like, man, shut up, white boy. Nobody asked you nothing. So he moves his knight, loses his queen, loses the game. And then everybody's like, oh, the white boy knows what's up. We gotta pay attention when he's... So then, when I had first asked who the best was, there was this kid in the back. He was obese. He was like 300 pounds. He was in the back. And I was like, you the best? And he was like, shut up, fat boy. This isn't a sandwich eating contest. And everybody's like laughing at him. He's like, no, I'm really the best. So I was like, all right, come here. I was like, all right, so my boy says he's the best. We're gonna see what happens. So he plays, and he does. He beats everybody. He gets a book. And what I saw was that like racial barriers and like pecking order, you know what I mean? The traditional pecking order, the obese kid wasn't really respected, but now he was respected. And I was like, man, how crazy is it that all of these kids actually know the game, can play it well, but they've made mistakes in their life that landed them here? Like, that doesn't even make sense. So as I was leaving, like all the rap lyrics I ever heard about chess in that bank that I've been making, they all just hit me. And I was like, all right, this is a thing. If I take the rap lyrics to lure the kids in, I can start teaching them more about chess. But then that even wasn't enough, right? Like, I mean, chess is awesome. It's a great game. It's one of the few global games that people play, right? If we got on a plane and went anywhere, I guarantee you almost in any city we landed in, we would find some people playing outside playing chess, and then while we were playing, somebody's gonna drive by banging out Jay-Z, banging out, you know what I'm saying, Wu-Tang, or you know what I'm saying, 50, whoever, Drake. And all of those guys have mentioned chess in their music. So I was like, well, if chess isn't enough, it has to be about life and stuff like that. And so at that point, I started researching chess more, and it turned into what we have now, the Hip Hop Chess Federation. And so we don't just teach chess, we have a bunch of life strategies. Some of the life strategies are in the book. The first 12 filters, right? Different ways that you can look at long and short-term goal planning, look at recovering from loss, look at you know, just being more patient about the idea of what you can do with any given situation. And emotional control, right? Like I was working to create the book. I started doing research by working at a school, but I didn't have a teaching credential, so I got in as a security guard. And it was crazy. I saw crazy stuff go on. I learned a lot about American education and its failures and some of its strengths, but I also mainly learned a lot about drug abuse, alcohol abuse, gangs. I learned a lot about violence. I learned a lot about how to communicate with kids who are really, you know, active gang members, you know what I mean, or live in those areas. And one of the main things I learned about is how many of our children in America, especially in the urban sectors, they're walking around with post-traumatic stress disorder, right? And it's undiagnosed and it's untreated. And right, and then we're saying, but how come Johnny doesn't have all A's? Well, because Johnny's thinking about he might actually catch a bullet, right? Either on the way to school or on the way back, or some of these girls, you know, that carry knives, not because they're bad people, but because they get harassed and they don't, you know what I mean? They don't have any protection. And so that kind of stuff, it really elevates their stress levels, right? And their sense of focus. And so here we have this Venn diagram here where you can see these overlapping themes between music, chess, and martial arts. Nonviolence is such a really big part of what we do, and we do it through teaching martial arts. A lot of times when I say, like, you know, we teach jiu-jitsu, people are like, hey, wait, what's going on? You know, because rap already has like this frame of being like super violent, right? So then it's like, hey, what's going on with the jiu-jitsu, man? And I'm like, well, you know, really, like if you look at, like, if you think about who are some of the most non-violent and peaceful people on the planet, you know, you say, well, you know, like Buddhist monks or like Shaolin monks. I'm like, exactly. And they train their whole life in blades, in punching, in kicking, in throwing stars, and all these weapons. And it's because they have confronted all of these fears and all of these concerns about violence and everything else that they're completely at peace. And so people don't understand that. A lot of the violence that happens is because these kids are stressed out, they don't have any physical outlets, they have no way and no filter of how to assess and understand what's really happening, and that's why they lash out. And so that's why Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is what we teach. And so this is at one of the schools here in the Bay, down in East Side San Jose. And it was really crazy because this school, when I started teaching there, just a few kids played chess. And then by the time I was only there for like a month or two, I would open my classroom up at lunch to have games. And like we would have like near riots over games. When you see this girl here, she had just begun playing chess, and then like she ended up being like one of the strongest players in the school. And I remember at one point she was basically at the end of a tournament, and there was this boy. And then so like the guys had kind of come in first, and they were all kind of milling around, and this armada of girls came. And like, cause Amber, she walked in first, and her head was kind of down. You could see she was kind of in everything. And this like, there were like 12 girls who came to the door, and I'm like, what's up? And they're like, we're here for Amber. I was like, okay, welcome, right? So they came in, and like they had this huge game, and then like she won it. After being chased around the board with very little material, but she figured out how to outsmart the dude and win. And like the school was nuts. And I used to be like, hey, you guys it's chess, man. Like they were just like too wild. So again, unity, strategy, and nonviolence, right? When you're teaching chess, you're essentially teaching strategy. And when you're teaching, strategy comes from a Latin root word, strategos, which means leader of the army, right? That's what chess is about. Right? If we want to get kids out of gangs, if we want to get them out of doing all kinds of wild group activities, we need to help them to be comfortable believing in the power of their own decision, right? And trusting their own decision. And so, leadership is such a big part of what we do here. That's one of my students right there. He's actually blind. And I currently teach him chess and jiu-jitsu. And we have a chess and entrepreneurship class. Entrepreneurship is such a big deal because I think as the American economy and the world economy continues to become more digital, that, kids can actualize their ideas for business purposes faster than ever, right? And even just their access to information has never been greater. So I was meeting with, I was talking with some kids just last week, and I was like, my daughter taught herself Python between the ages like 12 and 14. I was like, she can make like 80 grand a year just based on what she knows, dude. I know you could do something like that. You don't have to go learn Python, but you could do something. And so this youngster here, because he's blind, he wanted to create a phone app that helped people order food because his retinas don't function. So even though he can kind of walk around, sometimes he uses a cane, sometimes he doesn't. He can't read menus. So he created this idea for an app called iMenu, like EYE, iMenu, and it's going to help people read menus, and it has like a Siri component, so people, so even if you can't see what's on the phone, you can hear it. And so I helped him put everything together, and then he went and did this pitch, and he was awarded $100,000, and so we're working on the app like right now. This is me and Tupac. That's Pac on the right, obviously. And he was a chess player. He was a friend of mine. We met that moment. Like, we had only known each other for like 1 minute at that point. But we met through the guy on the left with the polka dots. And you know, me and Pac were always cool. You know, he was a chess player. And so if you see Mr. Machiavelli moving pieces like telekinesis, it's a chess game, let's play with real pieces. Now, that may or may not make a lot of sense to you, but really what that's about is something that really brought me to love chess and this idea of fusing it with hip hop. And that is that a lot of really good chess players are in jail. They're in prison. And like, if you go look up, I think it was it the Princeton chess team? Or I think it was the Princeton chess team went to go play at Rikers and got housed. Housed, okay? But in most prisons, a lot of wardens do not like the inmates to play chess, and they often take the boards and pieces away from the inmates. And it seems to be based around this really stupid idea that the algebraic notation, like when you're playing chess, how you move to e4, e5, they have this idea that the inmates will use the algebraic notation to do something sinister, right? And then the CEOs, I don't know what it means. Oh, there's a riot, right? But like, that's not going to happen, right? And that's such a like insane fear, but it's real. So a lot of times they take it away. I know inmates who have told me that they've played chess through the wall with other inmates speaking in algebraic notation. Do you realize the cognitive function in play to do that? That's insane, right? And so one of the things, so when he says, it's a chess game, let's play with real pieces, look, he didn't say Tupac was playing, he said Machiavelli's moving pieces. Who is Machiavelli? Obviously, the Italian philosopher, writer, whatever, who made The Prince, which changed Tupac's life, which made him call himself Machiavelli, right? So it came to Pac during this time when he was on lockdown, and so he's talking about, I can play with real pieces now. You know what I'm saying? Like let's play with real pieces. I'm no longer in solitary. That's the kind of psychology. And to that, the reason I mention that is because so many American children are not getting groomed and not having their cognitive functions enhanced the way that they could be, right? And so like, I want more technology companies and I want more innovators to start looking in the hood for these kinds of people. Any kid who could play blindfolded, speaking in algebraic notation, they could either be working here or create the next Google. There's a lot of wisdom in our local community that we're not cultivating. Right? And it's not their fault that they're from Eastside San Jose. It's not their fault that they're from Oakland or whatever. It's not their fault they're from East LA. But I know we can do more. And so, again, chess and entrepreneurship. When I talk to the kids, Jay-Z, Will Smith, Drake, J. Cole, 50 Cent, RZA, and GZA, I remind the kids that like a lot of the top tier dudes are chess players. But the reason why kids in hip hop play chess is not to win trophies. So like, like right now, Magnus Carlsen is the world champion. If you say, hey, what do you think of Magnus Carlsen? The average kid is gonna shrug their shoulders. They don't know him, they don't care, right? They don't care because they don't play chess for the same reason. They're playing it to get sharp. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Fresh. It's a movie from the 80s about this kid who's older sister is being pimped out by this heroin dealer. But his father, who's played by Samuel Jackson, is a street hustler who plays chess. And so the more that the kid plays chess with his father, he figures out how he can get his sister away from the drug dealer. And so it's a great film. And then the movie like Searching for Bobby Fischer, it's about Josh Waitzkin. And so, Josh's entry into chess is playing in the streets. And then he gets like a classical teacher, and there's kind of like this philosophical breakdown, and he ends up going back to the street hustler to help him get his game back up. And ironically, in his real life, he ends up quitting chess and then going on to get a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he's like a really good dude at that. So I tell the kids, Jay-Z, Will Smith, these guys are not successes by accident. You know what I mean? They think about what they do, they plan what they do, and you need these tools to be successful. Now, any success that you get that you haven't planned for, you lose it. Like, you see people all the time who win the lottery in 3 years, they're broke and back in the trailer home or whatever, because they don't know what they're doing. They didn't plan to have that money. And so you should make plans to have money. You should make plans to enhance your wisdom and figure out where you're going to be down the line and how to quantify it and qualify it. And so that's what's in my book. In the back, they have these 12 filters about long and short-term goal planning and other things. So this is one of the highest moments of my life. The World Chess Hall of Fame called us, asked us to come out and do basically an exhibit. It's like a museum. And so when we did this thing, it was called Living Like Kings. Our first day, we had more visitors than came to the World Chess Hall of Fame to see Bobby Fischer's exhibit. Like, there were lines around the block. People couldn't get in. They were mad. And all of this stuff happened during Mike Brown and Ferguson. So, like, the Central West End is where we were. Ferguson was like 15 miles down the road, and it was on fire, and there was helicopters, and there was all this madness. But Rizza and I went there. We spoke to about 500 kids at this one event about nonviolence, and the police had killed a kid the night before, after Mike Brown. His name was Vonderit Myers. And so me and Rizza are like, we're about to do this nonviolent talk now? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's never been harder to sell. But it worked. The kids understood what we were talking about, and we left there and we went to a juvenile hall where we played chess with the kids and talked to them about chess and life. And then we ended up, that's where we started our first program, actually, was in the juvenile hall there. And the reason I say that is because I know this works in terms of teaching nonviolence. Because of all the rioting and the looting, like, there was a completely skewed experience of what was happening in St. Louis, but we were actively and directly working with kids in the hood, helping them understand nonviolence, and they were getting it, And so, that exhibit lasted about a year, and it was the second biggest and most diverse attended, exhibit that they had, and so I was really proud of that. And so, the main way that we teach chess is through teaching the cultural connectivity, right? Like, I went and did a talk at Harvard School of Education. This guy was like, this Latino kid came up to me. He was like, I really like your talk, but chess is just really like an old white man's game. I don't understand, like, why you're using this old white man's game to try to teach kids in the hood. That doesn't make any sense. And I said, well, I guess it all starts with your misunderstanding of chess. Like, the idea that you think it's an old white man's game is exactly why I teach. And he was like, what do you mean? So I said, well, chess comes from India. And then the Arabs learned it from the Indians. And as they raided and traded through the Horn of Africa and came over to West Africa, the Africans got it. And then in 700 AD, they looked across the Iberian Peninsula, and this German guy had a problem with someone who had attacked his daughter in Spain, and he was like, I think they got a lot of money in there, man. You guys should, like, see what's up. So the Moors were like, let's go. And they crossed the Iberian Peninsula, and they came in and they brought algebra, and they brought the Greek classics, which they had been translating from Baghdad, and they brought chessboards. And that's how the Jews and the Christians started playing it. So it goes from Spain into France and Sicily, and then eventually it goes into England. And Benjamin Franklin is like the second American by name known to play, and he wrote this essay called On the Morals of Chess, and it breaks down like how chess helps your character. And that small essay alone totally changed my life. Like, when I started trying to figure out that I'm going to do this, and so I said, the first complete books on chess were written by the Muslims, but then the Jews innovated and the Christians innovated, and so everybody kind of owns this game. There's not a game that so many different cultures and races and faiths like completely are connected to. And so, this is why. And he was like, that's the story of it? I was like, yeah, that's the Cliff Notes. I mean, it's much deeper. But there's a book called The Immortal Game by David Shank you could read, and an amazing woman over at Stanford wrote a book called Birth of the Chess Queen, about how the chess queen wasn't an original piece. It was the king and his vizier. And then over time, as the more women in Europe started taking on leadership positions, if the kings would die, right, the queen gets on the board, and she didn't start that strong, but little by little, over a couple centuries, she becomes the strongest piece on the board. Telling that story to young girls totally changes their posture. I see them sit up more, right? And we say, look, it's not enough to just say you're a king, or it's not enough to say you're a queen. Kings and queens move in very specific ways. So when you're out on the street, you can't just act any way. You have to know that queens don't move like that. You have to move like a queen. And then you will see, differences in your grades, and you know what I mean, who you're around and all that. And so it's been a great ride. So Bobby Bruce in the Bronx .com is coming. I just got a few more swaps. And there's Emmanuel, and he just right after he got his award, and we're working on iMenu right now. We have a summer camp we're doing, and he learns jiu-jitsu too. He's gonna have his first jiu-jitsu tournament in about 4 weeks in Alameda, and we're starting to slowly grow. And the other thing I want to add before I finish is just that one of the other things that I've learned is I started intending this to take it to Black and Latino kids in the hood. That was my original plan, because I felt like a lot of the American school systems were ignoring them, and there weren't enough African American philanthropists or whatever to help them. So that's why I created this. At risk. So if I say at risk, you're thinking, Latino guy, he might be a gang member, or a Black dude, might be a crack dealer or a weed dealer, whatever. That was my intention. After I created it, and the more that I started engaging kids, I realized that there was this separate group of at-risk kids. And they actually tend to be white and Asian. And they're actually just, like, I was kind of loud and crazy, but I was a nerd when I was a kid. But there are a lot of kids who are just kind of quiet and reserved, and parents would start bringing me their kids, and they'd be like, hey, this is my son. When he comes home, he just sits in his room. Like, he doesn't go out, he doesn't talk, he doesn't do anything. And I'm worried about him. Like, he hasn't done anything, he hasn't, you know what I mean? But like, he doesn't talk, he sits in his room all day. So I sat down with him, talked to him about chess, get him to play a little bit. I know he's not necessarily thrilled about the idea of doing jiu-jitsu, because he's small and he's not really engaging, but I get him on the mat. And like, now these kids are totally different human beings. And what I'm finding is that this second group of at-risk kids, they're a lot bigger than we thought. You know what I mean? Like at the school that I was at originally in San Francisco, it was so wild with fights with Blacks and Latinos, and kids who were cutting themselves, and kids who were drinking, and just wild, that like a lot of the Asian kids aren't even considered, right? Because it's like, as long as they're not trying to shoot up the school or start a fight, we're happy with them. But we don't know what's happening in their head. Like, that kid might want to jump off the 3rd floor right now. We have no idea. So I would always refer to the Asian kids as the invisibles, because just because they were quiet, just because they were getting A's, didn't mean they were okay. And the school was okay with, you know what I mean? As long as they weren't actively fighting, we didn't worry about them. And so I think that there is this second group of at-risk, like socially withdrawn kids, boys and girls, that I'm noticing in schools and in America, and I think that we should be working on helping them as well. We need to start working on helping them as well. And I think that chess is just such a great tool. It teaches it raises cognitive function. Kids who study chess their math grades are 15% higher. Reading comprehension goes up. There's so many studies, not even recent studies that go all the way back to like the 70s that talk about this. And chess is so cheap. There's no reason we shouldn't have it in every school, every day across America. Especially when, you've seen the test scores. Our kids need help. And this is absolutely, absolutely a great tool. So thank you for coming. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to ask. On Instagram, I'm at Real Hip Hop Chess, and you can see some of the kids that I work with and some of the stuff we do there. And then hiphopchess.com is the regular site for the org, for the nonprofit. And Bobby Bruce in the Bronx, look for it. Got some shirts over there. You guys rock. Any questions?
So you mentioned at-risk students. I wanted to know what do you believe are the characteristics of your program that they respond to that maybe other programs or other activities kids could get involved with doesn't have? Is it about personal attention? Is it the subject matter is
what it
interesting
is?
to them?
Most of the kids, that's a great question. And I think like the first part is just, there's two things. One, I don't think even a lot of nonprofits that mean well, I think that they don't connect with kids because they're afraid of who they're trying to help. So like, we got this great after school program, but don't beat me up. You know what I mean? And so like, you can't teach kids you're afraid of, right? And the other part is you can't judge them. So like, I didn't come in saying like, hey, so what's up, dude? You look like you're a norteño. What's going on? Are you in a set? Like, I don't do that. I just play chess, right? And then little by little, they see that the judgment isn't there. And then they'll be like, man, I just stopped smoking weed. Oh, for real? Okay. You know what I mean? And that's it. That may be the only thing you get for like 2 weeks is that they stop smoking weed. And then you just be like, you smoking? No? You still, okay, cool. All right, that's good. Don't smoke, and little stuff like that. And so I think it's just the human engagement. What I'm finding is like a lot of kids, whether they're withdrawn, like some of my newer students, or whether they're like gang impacted or very active in the streets, like the lack of judgment and the consistent engagement is what makes it happen. That's what makes it turn. And then when you're playing with them and you're talking about, well, why did you move the knight there? What did you think was going to happen? And you're helping them, right? Because chess is helping them like reassess their flaws. And that's a hard thing for anyone to do. And they're using chess as a filter to self-assess and reassess. And then when you help them without judging them, they want to learn more. That's what I think. Yeah. Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you very much. I really do appreciate your time, and this was awesome. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.